Hello, everyone. I thought it would be a good idea for us to do a little review session of how to make our hero Aridel cast her magic spell. If I go into play right now, I've just got this outdoor environment that I put together quickly. I did use a height map, so all Aridel can do right now is walk and run. We learned how to toggle walk and run in class, so hopefully you followed along when we did that. By the way, if anybody wants a review session on how to make that happen, I'm happy to shoot a video for that as well. I like the way this looks out here, by the way. It's pretty cool. Anyhow, I'm going to hit escape, and if you recall, Aridel did not come with terrific animations, and we retargeted all of the animations from this character. And this is something that I bought on the marketplace years ago that I don't even think is available anymore. However, I still think the animations are very good. So we retargeted from Ghost Lady into this elf druid Aridel, who is functioning as our active player. If I open up that directory, we can even find the retargeted animations folder that we made together. And inside of there, just to keep things organized, because we may retarget animations from other asset packs, I made sure that this one contained a folder called From Ghost Lady, just so that we can remain organized. And inside of there, I've got one folder clearly named ABP, so we know that the animation blueprint is inside of that folder. There are the IK retargeters in this folder and the IK rigs, and inside of the animations folder, most importantly, are all of the animation sequences that we retargeted, okay? And if I hover my mouse over any of these, they're all going to read anim underscore and then something underscore and then a number. If you look at the top of this window, it says animation sequence. Now, anytime we want to play an animation that is outside of the state machine that exists inside of your animation blueprint, that's possible. That's possible to do. However, in order to make that happen, we have to convert the animation sequence in question into a different asset type. And that's going to be called an animation montage. Now, the animation that I like very much, and we may implement several of these as we go along, but for casting the spell, this one caught my eye, anim underscore cast spell underscore 03. And again, this is an animation sequence. I can double click that if I want to preview it. And here I envision something like her shooting a magic energy ball or a fireball or something like that out of her hand. Okay. So let's get started on that. I'll close the animation window, and creating animation montages is extremely simple. You find the animation, assuming that you've already retargeted it to that character. You find the animation in question, and you simply right-click and move your mouse up in the contextual pop-up menu here, up to Create, and use this option, Create Anim Montage. And that will create an asset, and you can see that unlike the rest, it is an animation montage as opposed to an animation sequence. Here is just a brief word of caution. If you're going to be creating an animation montage and you wish to use notifies, what you want to do is add the notifies first in the animation sequence before you make the montage, because they will propagate into the montage. That's the easiest way to do it. I'm not going to be making use of any notifies today, but just for future reference, that's something that you ought to keep in mind. I also don't feel the need to rename this because it simply just uses the same name and adds the word montage at the end, and that seems okay with me. I could double-click that and preview it. And there are some settings here that can be adjusted, but I don't think that we're going to need to for today's exercise, okay? So you can see our little star there, though. That means that we do have to save it now that we've made it, okay? And I can close that. I have Aridel's blueprint open, but I'll show you how I got to that once more. In the content directory, remember what we did. We took our third-person character, the default BP underscore third-person character, here in the blueprints directory, and I simply duplicated this and renamed it BP Aridel. If I open this up, hopefully you'll recall, this is the little bit of scripting we did, by the way, and I can comment this. Excuse me, I bumped the mic stand. I can comment this out, toggle, walk, run. Okay, and you can see that that doesn't take very much to do. If I hold down Shift, then I'm running. And if I release Shift, then I'm walking. And you can see that we're setting the max walk speed off of the character movement component, depending on whether or not I'm holding down Shift. So just to demonstrate that quickly, if I'm outside and I go into play, I'm walking by default, but if I hold down Shift, now I'm running. Okay? Great. Okay, I think that looks pretty cool. And let me get my bearings again. I got far away from my player start there. Okay, so here we are. Now, before we can script the montage, what we have to do is we have to modify the animation blueprint for this character. Now, I happen to remember where we put it. We put it into the Elf Druid Aridel folder within the retargeted animations from Ghost Lady here in ABP. And we've got the basic locomotion animations that we retargeted, as well as the blend space, and also the animation blueprint itself, which is right here. One thing that you need to keep in mind, and by the way, if you didn't remember this, there is another way to find this. I might as well show you. Let's suppose that you didn't remember where you saved that animation blueprint, but you know where the character is. I can open up BP underscore Aridel and go to the viewport, and then I can select the mesh and find the animation mode where it says use animation blueprint, and I can see which one we assigned. If I then click the browse to asset in content browser icon, then that will take me directly to it, okay? And it's in exactly the same location that it was previously. So before we can implement an animation montage, we do have to make a small and easy modification to the animation blueprint here. So I will double click on that to open it. And if the anim graph is not showing for whatever reason, you just go over here on the left and double click anim graph to see it. What you want to do before the final output pose is just make a little room. You can just drag that over. Pull off of this component to local and type the word slot. We're going to elaborate on animation slots as we go along, but what we're going to use today is this one called slot default slot. And you simply click that. And if it doesn't automatically connect itself to the final output pose, just make sure that those wires are connected on both sides, okay? And really, that's all we have to do other than to compile and save. Now we can play animation montages. Great. So let's implement that now inside of our character. So we'll go back to our content directory into third person, where we know we have stored the blueprint for Aridel. And we are going to go ahead into the event graph, and I will use just like a prototyping input for this. I want to use my left mouse button every time I want to play that montage to initiate her spellcasting. So I'll right click and I will search for left mouse. And pretty soon you're going to see left mouse button under mouse events. So go ahead and click that, please. And we're going to do a few things here. It's not going to be the correct way at first, because I want you to see what can go wrong if you're not careful. But let's just say that we want to press this button, and when we press it, we want that montage to play. So the node that you can search for is called Play Anim Montage. And especially if you have context sensitivity turned off, you're going to find all different versions of nodes that have to do with playing anim montages. But for now, I want you to use this one, play anim montage. Okay, so here, all we have to do is we have to select which montage we want this character to play in the animation slot. And when I open up this dropdown, there should not be very many. In fact, there should just be one because we only made one out of all of the animations that are able to be played on that particular skeletal mesh. So when I open this, ooh, my goodness, there are other montages, but this is the one that I'm referring to. I didn't retarget these, so I guess they came with some other asset pack. But in any case, this is the one that we made, right? Remember, this was the same name. And if I didn't remember that, by the way, I could also, again, just find it. So we can go Content, and I can go back into Elf Druid Aerodel, Retargeted Animations from Ghost Lady Animations. And you can see it's even color-coded there. If I have that highlighted, remember, we can go back into the blueprint and use the selected asset or use asset browser selection, and I could just pop that in there, okay? And the target, it does not need anything because we are inside of itself. We're in the BP_Aerodel blueprint. And if I did this and only this, we would have something. So I'll compile and save, and I'll go into play. And we could do everything that we could do before. I can walk, I can run, I can jump, and all those things. But if I press down my left mouse button, you can see that's happening. Okay? Now, the problem, though, is that if I am locomoting and I choose to cast that spell, nothing stops the capsule from moving the character around. And it looks like the character is ice skating. So what we want to do is address that problem. So let me get back to my player start again and go back into Aerodel's blueprint. Okay, so here is how we generally deal with that. We're going to build this up one step at a time. I have disconnected the execution wire by Alt-clicking or Option-clicking on either end of it. And what we're about to do involves the character movement component that comes with the character class. So I'll drag that here into the graph. The next thing that I want to do is pull off that output pin and type disable movement like so. And I'll connect pressed into that input execution pin. From the same character movement component, I can drag out of there and type stop movement immediately, like so. And that provides the target for this node as well. And now, if I finish connecting up these execution wires, we've made an improvement, but we're still not completely done yet. So I've compiled and saved, and now let's see what happens. Okay, so I can walk, I can run, I can jump, and indeed, I can cast that spell. In fact, I can cast that spell over and over again. But now the problem is I cannot move, right? Because I disabled my movement. So let me hit escape one more time and just show you what we've accomplished. If my character is locomoting while I press the left mouse button, it will be stopped in its tracks in order to cast that spell. And I can continue doing that, although now my locomotion has been disabled. So to re-enable it, it's pretty easy. We're going to go back into Aerodel's blueprint one more time, and the return value of this node, play anim montage, is part of the reason that I recommended that you use this one, because the return value is a float value that represents the duration of that animation montage. So what I can do, therefore, is pull off of here and search for a node called delay. And if we do not provide a float value, if I were to disconnect this, I could set any delay time that I want, and that's in seconds and, fractions of seconds because it's a float. But if I connect this wire, now this delay is equal to the duration of that montage. So I allow the montage to play, and I'm delaying the execution flow until it's finished by doing this. Next, we can either use the same character movement component that we did before, or there are other options. I can just drag it back into the graph over here just for, keeping our work looking clean. Actually, I think I'll put it closer to here because the next thing that we're going to do is off of character movement is we're going to set movement mode. Set movement mode. And you can see that is under character movement right there. Now, by the way, if you don't do any of these three, disable movement, stop movement immediately, or set movement mode, if I don't have the character movement component hooked up to it in the first place, well, what you'll get, I'll do this one more time, is set movement mode. And you can see it says character movement in parentheses. So it will provide that for you, but this is no different from what we already have in our components. So it just connects it for you. So you can know that. And I didn't do it over here because I figured I could just double dip. And I could indeed triple dip if I wanted a wire going all the way over to here. In fact, let's do that because that gives me an opportunity to make a reroute node and make this easier for us to see. Okay, so they're all sharing that same character movement component. And now I need to set the new movement mode back to what it was before we played the montage and disabled the movement, which was walking. That is the default movement mode of our character in our character movement component. So this is what is going to allow us to play that montage. And then after playing it, so I can walk, I can run, I can jump, whatever. If I press the button while I'm locomoting, she stops. And then as soon as the animation is over, she can continue walking and running and anything else. Okay, so that works very, very well. Okay. So now let's hit escape and we'll move on to the next part. I'm going to re-enter the main blueprint for Aerodel, the character blueprint for Aerodel, and we're going to switch over into the viewport like this. What I would like to do is select the mesh from the components panel and temporarily take it out of its animation mode. We are going to instead of using the use animation blueprint, temporarily we're going to choose use animation asset. And the asset that I want to play is going to be that cast spell 03. Now, as soon as I do that, it's going to be playing and looping that animation over and over and over again. And you can control whether or not it's doing that right underneath here where it says playing and looping. So I'm going to turn both of those off and she will freeze in position. Now I'm going to scrub using this initial position value until I see where her hand is at full extension, so I can see where I'm going to want to eventually spawn our magic projectile, our magic power. Now, there are a number of ways that I can do this, but I am going to use another type of component, which is called a scene. It's called a scene component. So let's go ahead and find one. We'll click Add and search for Scene. And that's all you want is this component right here under Utility, which is called a Scene component. And I will place that in there. And I guess it's okay if that's relative to your mesh. That's not a big deal. So, and what I mean by that is that it's indented underneath the mesh. It does not have to be. It could be a sibling to the mesh if we wanted it to be. But it also works if it's a child of the mesh, like that. Or some people say parented by the mesh. So the scene component is represented just by this gizmo here. And the scene component in reality is just something that has a transform. That's all. It's got a transform. And I want to place it in a position relative to her hand about where I want that projectile to spawn. Something like this, okay? Now, one thing that I know from experience, and I had to learn this the hard way due to myself being colorblind, is that if we look at the legend down here, we can see that Aridel is facing the x-axis. And the axes are color-coded, and I know from experience, not from vision, that this color is not this color. For whatever reason, scene components tend to come in rotated by 90 degrees. So you want to make sure that you have your rotation snapping turned on and choose your rotation tool and rotate that by precisely a positive 90 degrees and switch back to your translation tool so that this color matches this color. If you don't do that, what you're going to find is that your projectile is going to end up shooting sideways. And that's happened to me a number of times. And like I said, I had to learn that the hard way. So the nice thing about this is that we can use this to specify a spawn transform or a spawn location for our projectile. So now that that's there, what we can do is we can go back into the event graph and we can implement that. I'm going to make a little room here. And on play anim montage, I think that it's easiest to control if we do this off of what's called a sequence. So I'll pull off of the output execution pin from play anim montage and search for SEQ until I find this node under flow control called sequence. A sequence will enable you to have sequential execution pins. And by the way, you can add more if you choose to by just clicking the Add Pin button. I can right-click to remove any that I don't need. Now, in actuality, these do occur in consecutive order, but most of the time we conceive of them as having a way of completing two actions sort of in parallel. That's how it's going to feel, even though they might be separated by a few ticks that we cannot perceive directly. So I know that I'm going to want to spawn the projectile at a different time during this montage compared to when it is complete. And if I go back into my viewport, I can check my mesh, and I can see that this is at about 0.832, okay? That's the position where her hand is at full extension. So if I go back into the event graph, I can pull off then 1 and enter another delay. Except this one, I can hard code 8.32, whatever it was, okay? And this is going to determine when that projectile is going to spawn. Off of the same action, by the way. All right. So again, you're not going to necessarily connect anything into the duration pin unless you make a float variable for that. But in this case, it's not necessary. If you wanted to, though, you could right-click this, promote it to a variable, and give it a name that makes sense to you, and it should inherit the default value after you compile, whatever you hard-coded there. Okay, so now we've got our, we can rename the variable something like spell spawn duration, something like that, okay? And hit enter, and we'll just compile and save as we go along here. Now, to actually make this projectile spawn, what we need to do is follow this with a node called spawn actor of class, or from class, excuse me. Spawn actor from class, and if you just type spawn actor, you'll find that pretty easily. Spawn actor from class. And the scene component is something that we are going to use to specify the spawn transform. Now, the transform, remember, a transform is location, rotation, and scale. And it's all wrapped up into this structure here, okay? If you see a struct or a structure, remember that you can right-click and split the struct pin. Now I have a spawn transform location, a spawn transform rotation, and also a spawn transform scale. And by the way, each of these is also a structure because each one is a vector made up of 3 individual floats. So let's split this first one and this second one especially. I'll right-click and split that struct, and I get access to the X, Y, and Z axes. I can do the same for the rotation, and that's going to be important as well, okay? So for the scene component, what I can do is I can say get world transform. And this does have to come off of an execution pin. So there's probably another way of doing this. I think I'll make it easier. We're going to say get world location. That doesn't require an execution pin. And also get world rotation. Okay, that way we don't have to include that into our execution path. And these are both structs in the same way that they were over here previously. So I'm going to split this one, giving me access to X, Y, and Z, and I'll split this one, X, Y, and Z. Even though it's rotation, all of these are float values. Okay, but I can't specify the class yet because we actually haven't made our magic power. We haven't made our magic projectile yet. So we'll compile and save. Actually, this is not going to finish compiling, so I'll disconnect that for now and compile and save, right? Because without a class, this is going to fail. So we'll leave that there for the time being. And we're going to go back to our main view and navigate back to our main content directory. To make our projectile, we're going to make something customized here. So what I would recommend is creating a new folder for this, new folder. And I will call this one Magic Spells. And inside of there, I suppose I could have called it Aridel's or Aridel magic spells. That would probably have been better practice because who knows, we might have enemies that also have their own magic spells. But we can cross that bridge when we come to it. So what I need to do in here is I need to start by making an actor blueprint. To do that, we will right-click as usual, go up to the blueprint class option and left-click, and from there we will choose the actor class. I'm going to call this one, let's say, BP underscore magic projectile. Okay, and we're going to open this up. And in fact, I will dock it just to make it easier to see. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is select the default scene root. And as a child of the default scene root, we need to add a collision volume. And I think that it's going to be sort of like a magic ball of energy or something like that. So I will look for collision. And what I want here, I think the most appropriate one would be a sphere collision like this, okay? And what I want to then do is to left click and hold on my sphere collision and drag it upward on top of the default scene root to replace the default scene root, okay? This is now going to act as the default scene root. I also want to add a couple more components here. I'm going to add a static mesh, and that is going to be definitely parented by the sphere collision, and I'll call this one core. This is going to be the core of our magic spell, and I've named it, but I have to remember to go to the details panel and specify, well, which static mesh asset do I want to use? The one that I usually use for this is called Material Sphere. And when you find it, I would recommend hovering over them and looking at the path that is at the very, very top. You want to use the one not the one that I just used, excuse me. So let me undo that. You want to use the other one, the one that's in starter content, Material Sphere, because I don't want to modify any engine content. Okay, so we want not the engine content one, but the starter content one. So I will select that. And here I notice that it's much larger than the collision volume that we used. So what I'll go and do over here in the details panel with this static mesh selected is to padlock the scale and just shrink it down until it fits inside of our collision. Okay? Now, there's another component we're going to need to add, and it's called the projectile movement component, and that's something that is available for the actor class. So I'll click the Add button and search for projectile movement. Like so. You'll find that easily, projectile movement. And we have to set up some things inside the projectile movement component, particularly the initial speed and the maximum speed. I don't want this to accelerate over distance, so I'm going to set this to the same value for the initial speed and the maximum speed for the time being. And let's start with something like 4,000 and 4,000. Like that. 4,000 and 4,000. One thing that we also have to watch out for is whether any of these components have gravity applied to them. So here's what I would recommend that you do. Select the first component in your components list and just simply in the details panel type the word gravity. And if it says enable gravity, well, this is a magic projectile. It's not a ballistic, like a rocket or a bullet or something like that. So it should not, as magic, I think it should not be subject to gravity. So I'm going to turn that off. But I want to search my other components, like this one here, the core, that's a static mesh, and that also has gravity enabled on it. And inside the projectile movement component, I happen to know that one of the parameters is the gravity scale, and it defaults to 1, and I want to set that to 0. So there are no components here that are behaving in any way that conforms to gravity or subject to gravity. So here we'll compile and save, and we can kind of test this in a sense. If I hit simulation, as you can see, it just sort of shoots off. But if I change my point of view a little bit, zoom out and angle this, hit simulation, you kind of get an idea of how fast that's going to shoot, like so. Okay? Now from here, we're going to decorate this to look a lot more magical. For one thing, the material on this does not look like magic at all. So why don't we make a material specifically for this magic projectile? To do so, in the same folder, I'm going to right-click and make a new folder called Material. Or I could be more specific, Magic Projectile Material. Okay, therefore, there's no ambiguity. We'll open that up, and I will right-click and simply make a new material, left-clicking on this material. We will name this M underscore. That's the naming convention for materials. And I'm going to call this core glow. Core glow. Because I want the inner part of my magic projectile to have a glow to it. And believe it or not, you can do that at the material level. You don't actually have to put a light inside of it. If I double click this, any material is going to come with this result node by default. And the base color input can accept different types of, different types of things. We're going to get into much more into materials as we go along. But one of the things that it can accept is a basic color. And a color is RGB, and that is a type of constant. It is a vector 3 constant, or a constant vector, or a constant 3 vector. Now, to make constants is very easy. I mean, you can right-click and search for constant, and you will see all different types of constants. But if I wanted to make a simple constant, I could just do like that. I held down the number 1, and now I've just got one value. It's a float. If I wanted to make a constant 2, I could hold down 2 and left-click. But 2 is not enough for a color. We need 3 floats to define a color. So I held down 3, and I got my constant 3 vector. So I'll delete the other 2 and bring this up here. Now these are X, Y, and Z. You're going to think of them instead of thinking of them as spatial coordinates, think of them as color coordinates. So X is the value for red, Y is green, and Z is blue. Let's see. Maybe I don't remember how to do that. Double click, double click, double click. There's someplace you can double click in here. Drag and drop colors here to save. So if I were to drag and drop, yeah, I guess that's what it is. So maybe I didn't double click that fast enough, but I think it works either way, okay? So in this case, you just take whatever you have and you drag it into there. In the meantime, I accidentally changed some of my values by goofing around. So I'll get back to what I had before. And I will replace that, okay? And this one could probably be deleted, that one. Confirm delete. Okay. Ah! Boy, that's embarrassing. I keep on screwing this up. So I regret that I was trying to show you that little detail. But once you get used to it, I think you'll find that it may come in handy. Drag and drop. Come on. There we go. All right. Hit OK. So if I were to take this top pin, this is the RGB output from this node, which is the combination of the red, green, and blue together. And if I connect that to base color, you will see that my object by preview mesh takes on that color. There are many other settings here that I could adjust. For example, if I were to set the metallic value to 1 instead of 0, notice that it takes on a slightly more metallic look, but it doesn't quite look exactly like metal. Maybe if I take the specular and set that all the way to 1, it will be shinier. Maybe a little bit. I see some shine right there. Perhaps I didn't see that before. But the real reason that this doesn't look metallic is because of this roughness parameter. When an object has a rough surface, it gives off less of a reflection is an easy way to think about it. So if I were to make this fully rough, like 1, it would just be very flat in appearance. But if I were to set this to 0, or something close to 0, you'll see now it looks a little bit like a like a Christmas ornament. And if I wanted that to be metal, I could set all three colors to some middle value, like gray, which is approximately 4 and 4 and 4. I don't necessarily have to open this in order to make something that looks chrome, okay? And if I were to increase the roughness, let's say by 0.25, you can see it's starting to look more and more like metal already, okay? So let's double-click that again and go back to the color that we had, okay? And I'm going to set our roughness to 0. I want that to be shiny. But in reality, I don't think it's going to shine very much because we are going to make it glow profoundly. So the way that we can do that is by alt-clicking. I mean, it's optional. If you want to leave this connected to base color, you're welcome to do so, although it's unlikely that you're going to see it once it's emitting light. So you can option-click or alt-click that, and instead of connecting it up to base color, let's take the RGB out and connect that into emissive color. And you can see, now, to me, that looks like somebody blowing bubble gum. And it's not very glowy, but we can exceed a value of 1 in the emissive. Some of these have a range that's limited from 0 to 1, but not the emissive. I can go crazy with that. A good way to control that is to disconnect that and take the RGB out and connect that to a multiply node, and then provide what's called a scalar parameter, which is just basically a single constant. So I'll hold down 1, and I will connect it into B. Right now, I can then take the output of the multiply node and connect that back to emissive color. Now, if I increase this value, I could set it to something like, let's say, 500. And now it's glowing. And if I set it to something like 5,000, now it's really, really, really glowing. Let's try 10,000. Okay, so it keeps on going up, 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 up. And if this was also connected to base color, yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I can't see it. I'm colorblind, so maybe you all can tell me if you can see a difference. I personally cannot. I can, it's got engineering notation in it, but if I wanted to, I could right-click on that and just convert it into a parameter called emissive, okay? Or emissive strength or something along those lines, okay? And it still shows the engineering notation, but that's okay, all right? So we're multiplying the output of this by 10,000. So I'll hit apply and save. And now I don't need to be inside of this material anymore, so I can close it. All right, so going back, we've got our core glow. Go back to our magic projectile, which is still docked. So we'll go here. And on our core, let's clear our search because we were searching for gravity earlier. Clear our search. And with the mesh selected, with the mesh selected, not the collision volume. I should really rename that just so that it's not confusing. We'll call this sphere collision. Okay, therefore it won't be confusing. So the core is the mesh, and right now it just has the world grid material applied to it. But if I search for core, or what should I call it? Core glow or something? Core glow. There it is. Find that, and now if I simulate, looks a little bit more like magic, right? There are other things that we can do. I can attach what are called particle systems to this core and make it look even more magical. So let's compile and save this for the moment and leave it docked. And I'm going to go back to my main content browser. I imported some things, some asset packs into this project, and frankly, I haven't looked at all of them. But many of them are particle systems. They can be either Cascade or Niagara. Both still work in Unreal Engine 5. We talked about those in class. So here's one called KY Magic Effects, and I just want to inspect them. There's also one called Magic Spells. Actually, that looks interesting to me. Oh no, that was the one that we made, excuse me. Okay, so Magic Projectiles. Let's look in there. Magic Projectiles, and we're going to go into this Niagara folder and just check out some of the Niagara systems. So here's something, these are different categories, and we'll go into Arcane, and we'll see what some of these look like. Now, I have to caution you, when you open up a Niagara system for the very first time, it usually takes it a little bit of time to compile. So I'll double-click that, and you can see it says compiling, and up here, I would not recommend clicking that yet. And some of the time, they won't compile. If that happens to you, I would suggest maybe don't use that particular particle system until you know a lot more about how the particle systems work inside of Unreal Engine. So I'm going to stay away from that one as it turns out, and let's say go into maybe a different collection. Magic Projectiles, Content, let's go into KY Magic Effects, Particles, and I think, no, I don't like the looks of those just by perusal. Let's look Ultimate VFX and Magic Projectiles. Yeah, let's look at these. Niagara. Similar categories, Arcane. I wonder if this looks like the same one. I wonder if that one will compile, or if I was already in this one. I might have already been in this folder. Give it a second. Okay, so this is actually just apparently a newer version of the same collection, because all I did is I waited, and now it compiled. And that looks a little bit like a fireball. So that's up for consideration. Let's check out what some of these other things look like, such as Arcane Muzzle. And I'll just wait. Okay, so that's brief. And I want something to trail my magic projectile as it travels through the air. So this one is good. And I'm going to audition a couple more. So the muzzle ones I'm not that fond of, but this Arcane Trail, let's see how that looks. And you can combine them if you wish. So let's go back inside of our blueprint for the magic projectile. And as children of our static mesh, which is our core, we can add, I'm going to type Niagara, and you want a Niagara particle system component. And in this case, it actually remembered which one I had selected and chose it for me. I'm going to move this back in relationship a little bit. Let me just turn Arcane Trail. Didn't have it selected. I want to move that back so it's sort of following my mesh. I could also padlock it and scale it up. Make it bigger. Like that. Let's set that to 5 maybe. And bring it back some more. So that's going to be like a really cool looking trail. And I'll select the core mesh again and add another Niagara component. Particle system component. And this time I don't want it to be Arcane Trail. So if I wanted to have the same thing happen that happened before, let's see. Arcane Trail, which one is the one? It was called Arcane Trail Yellow. So I can just search for that here. Hopefully that's the one that compiled. Let's just double check. Okay. So I think that's the one. We're in good shape. So going back here, now we can select that one. And we can move it behind. And scale it up if we want to. Let's do maybe 10 on this one. And this may look just crazy ridiculous because of my poor color vision. I think that was too large. So you can combine these. In fact, just out of curiosity, boy, that's a little bit obnoxious, isn't it? Out of curiosity, we can also look into some of these other categories here, such as, I don't know, void. That sounds fascinating. How about indigo? There's a trail. That's a cool one. Also, if there's anything that persists, these are impacts, muzzles. Sometimes you'll get a particle system that just continues. So let's maybe look into a different category. Energy weapons, perhaps. Oh, those are sounds. Energy beam. Niagara systems. Okay, so these are constant power. So how about this one? Ion laser. See what that looks like and make sure that it does compile. Like I said, it can take a little time occasionally. Okay. That's pretty magical. I like that. Okay, so let's remember what that one was. That was NS hit constant ion something something. Okay, my game is saving. I'm going to pause until it finishes saving so you don't have to wait, and I'll be right back. Okay, so that's finished, and I'll save it. Of course, that feels like taking forever unto itself, doesn't it? Okay, I'll pause and be right back again. And we're back. Okay, so now let's go here, and I'll leave that highlighted for reasons that you'll see in just 1 second, because I'm going to go back up into my projectile blueprint, and if I add another Niagara system, Niagara, it's going to remember the one that I've got selected. That's very, very awesome. And by the way, that's also very, very large, so maybe it doesn't have to be so big. Not going into the negatives there. And I'm not quite sold on the yellow one, maybe. Yeah, I think I might even get rid of the yellow one. And let's see what this looks like when I launch it in simulation mode. I think that looks pretty magical. And you can keep on stacking particle systems if you want to. But I think that this is good enough for our purposes today. So now we have a BP underscore magic projectile class that I can spawn in Aradel's blueprint. You remember the spawn actor from class, I can now select BP underscore magic projectile, which is the one that we made, okay? And I can connect this execution pin. Remember, we set the duration here to what we scrubbed to, and I just reminded myself that I have to put the skeletal mesh back into its animation blueprint. Otherwise, it'll spawn, the character will spawn into the level just frozen like that. Okay, so that's good. Go back to the event graph, okay? And I'm going to show you something interesting here. If I go into the spawn location, okay, just the location vector, if I connect X to X, Y to Y, and Z to Z, that is exactly the same as if the location struct, I'm recombining it on both sides. Okay, that could have been one wire. It could have been one wire. That's equivalent to connecting all three. However, there is a reason that I am splitting the struct, and you're going to see that reason in just a moment. Actually, you're going to see it more for the rotation, so we've got both of them split. So we'll go X to X for now, Y to Y, and Z to Z. Okay, so this is the world location of the scene component that we placed in front of the character's hand. Okay, I'm going to leave the rotation disconnected for the time being. So I'll compile and save. And now when I play, in theory, oh, is it not spawning? Let's see. BP underscore Aradel. So we've got play and in montage. Then we've got a delay. And that's, I have it 8 seconds. I meant to be 0.832. That's the error right there. 8 seconds. Goodness. No. Okay. It's still shooting sideways. Now, if I were pointed in this direction, it would appear to shoot forward. But it's not following the rotation of the scene component or the character. Another thing I'd like to point out is that I cannot shoot up and I cannot shoot down. It's just confined to that one plane. So we're going to do a temporary fix for that. And I mean temporary because it's going to become more sophisticated in our next lesson. But we're going to go back into Aradel's blueprint. And just so we don't get confused, I'm going to close some of these other tabs that we no longer have to look at. Okay. It's really in this rotation here, okay? Because X is the forward axis. Okay. Y is the side-to-side axis, and that is the pitch, okay? So that, in other words, think of the y-axis as being sort of a line or a pole that goes left and right. And if something is rotating about that line, that means that it's pitching up or down. And I want to do something else with this so that I can point upwards or downwards. And then I'll connect my Z to Z, okay? And that will allow me to point left and right, okay? Because the Z-axis points straight up and down. So let's see if that helped. Great. So now, whatever direction I'm pointing, that's the direction that the spell goes. But I still can't point up, and I still can't point down, and I want to be able to do that. So we'll get out of there. And we're going to well, we don't have to disconnect this, but we cannot use the pitch. Even if it were connected, it still would not work. You'll see. I'm trying to point up, but that's not working. All right, because it's really, we've got to use something else for the pitch. So for our pitch, I disconnected that again by Alt-clicking or Option-clicking, and off of Spawn Transform Rotation. There's more than one way to do this, and we're going to explore different ways. But for now, I'll pull off and type Get Control Rotation. Okay. So we want to make sure that we have the right one. And yep, looks like this one right here. Okay, so this is a rotator. And I can split that struct and again gain access to all three of the float values. I'm going to use the pitch from this. And I want to check the target because it probably needs the player controller. So the player controller, I can get that just by pulling off. I don't have to cast anywhere. I'm already inside of this blueprint. And type get player controller. And I'm going to check to see if this is expecting something to populate its target pin, and indeed it is. It needs something called the player state object reference. So I can pull off of here and type, I just like to type state. That usually gets me there the fastest when context sensitivity is turned on. If I type state, it gets me right to that node. So I get player state. And notice that it's got a player state index of 0, because if there's more than one player or different pawns in a game, they have different indices. So this would be a good time for me to show you that. If I select the self component and search in the details panel for POS, okay, under pawn, auto possess player is set to player 0, but I think it defaults to disabled, and I probably set it that way myself as I was getting ready to film this. So usually the default is disabled and disabled. So you want to set this, if it's your player character, to player 0. And usually I would recommend placed in world or spawned when it is auto-possessed, because you may decide to actually place your actor into the world directly or spawn it somehow. Yeah, we'll get into spawning actual characters in a different context. But now that I've done that, and this is not necessarily, I'm not saying this is the best way, but this is the way that we are going to do it today. So you'll notice that if I go back into play, I can do everything that I could do before. I can also aim up, I can aim down, and all that stuff. I want to make another point, though, is that every time I fire off one of these magic spells, that actor will keep going forever. In other words, just by casting one of them, that's already loaded up into memory, and if I'm in battle throughout my level or throughout my game and I cast multiples of these spells, eventually you're going to have so many of them loaded into memory that it's going to affect performance. So we have to control that as well. And this part is very easy. Going back into our projectile blueprint, let's head to the event graph. We're not going to use these nodes, so I can marquee select and delete them, but on event begin play, I'll pull off of there and just type set lifespan. You just type set life, you'll get the set lifespan node. And if I enter just a value here, let's say something like 10 seconds, then it will automatically destroy itself and remove itself from memory after 10 seconds. So I'll compile and save, and let's see if we can actually see one for 10 seconds. 10 seconds might be more than we need. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I was just roughly counting, but you saw it disappear there. So let me make that a lot more obvious. Let's set this to 3 seconds. And you'll be able to see this more easily. Going back into play. 2, 3. Gone. Okay? So maybe it doesn't need a full 10 seconds. Even. So let's go maybe 7 seconds. Something like that. Another way that this is going to destroy itself, by the way, is by colliding with something, and we're going to get into the scripting for that next class meeting. But this is a great way to control its lifespan so that in case you don't hit something and destroy the projectile that way, it will destroy itself after a period of time that you get to specify there. Okay, now we can close the projectile blueprint because it has been made for the most part. What we now can do is think about adding our sound to this. And I know that we did design a sound in class, and that was left on Toby's laptop. So for the time being, what I would like to do is go back into our main content browser. And I know that some of these packs came with some sound effects that we could perhaps make into a sound cue. So I'll start by making a folder, and I will call this Magic Spell SFX for sound effects. And let's start by making a sound cue. So I'll right-click, and we're going to go to Audio and choose Sound Cue. And I'm going to call this, what should I call it? SC_Aradel Magic. Am I typing this correctly? Yeah, Magic underscore 01. Okay, because she might have other powers. You never know. I think she's going to. Anyway, I can open that up. There's nothing in it yet, but I'm going to dock it anyway. Here is a very nifty and useful thing. When you're either making things like sound cues or materials, did you know that you can have more than one content browser? If I go up to this window menu, I can scroll down to Content Browser and notice that Content Browser number 1 is already in use right here. It's docked in this view. Oops, didn't mean to minimize my screen there. It is docked here in this view, right? But if I go to my sound cue, which is right here, I can go to Window, Content Browser, and just choose Content Browser number 2. And then I can grab this tab and dock it. Make a little bit of room here. I can now go into the root content directory and just search for WAV, okay? And we're going to get WAV files and maybe anything else that has WAV in its spelling. Some of these are not going to be useful to us, and some of them might be. Remember, we can layer these up and combine them. Don't like that. Don't like that. Best starter content. Don't like that. Okay, so let's start with that on the left here. That'll be one layer. I'm going to combine several of them together. So that was the one that's highlighted. No, I don't like that. That's kind of interesting. I'm thinking of how these might sound in combination right now. That one's got a little sizzle and low end on it that I can perceive. I am wearing headphones, so hopefully you can hear that too. Kind of like that. Energy impact, that's not the same. I was concerned that these two are the same, and they're not. Energy shot, huge. Medium. Yeah, maybe the huge one. You scroll down and see if there's anything else. Some of these are stereo, and you know my feelings about using stereo sound effects for things that are supposed to appear as if they're coming from a precise location. But you know what? I can't help myself. That's pretty cool. Jetpack, no. Laser? Oh yeah. That should be all I need. Okay. So let's line all of these up. And we're not going to randomize them like we have in the past. All we need to do is combine them. So what I could do is grab a mixer node and just think about how many pins that I have to include and add them. Or I can use a more efficient method, which is just to marquee select all of the wave players and then drag a mixer node into the graph. And now I can connect the mixer output, or excuse me, the output of the mixer into the final output of the sound cue. So when I play the cue, we get all that. Now, if I highlight the mixer, I can go to the left here where it says input volume, and I can balance how loud I want each layer to be. So let's just zero all these out and bring them in one by one until we feel that they are well balanced. And of course, if I needed to, I could insert modulators here if I needed to change their pitch, things of that nature. So let's listen to this, this last layer. I think I like that. And then the second to last. Nice. And the third to last. Oops, it's in my mixer. I'm setting them all to 1, but they may not all be set to 1 by the time we're finished. Like that one might be a little bit too loud, I think. So let's try 0.8. Or maybe 0.6. All right, and let's go now to the next one. Set that to 1. Play the cue. I think that's a little loud as well, so we'll do maybe 0.5. What does this one sound like? Let's do 0.25 on that. I might reconsider a couple of these down here. It's getting a little busy sounding, so 1. Let's say 0.4. And this one, what does that sound like? It's too loud. We'll go 0.5. And then let me reset these back to 0 and remind myself what they were contributing. Okay, so they were contributing a lot of body to the sound. So, excuse me, I meant to type 0.4 here, and maybe 0.6 on this one. Not bad. Maybe that one can be 0.7. And by the way, I can also play the individual nodes by selecting them and just clicking play node. See, that one I really, really like. I think that one needs to be full volume, if not twice as loud. I can even type it 2. I like that trail that it gives it. Okay, so we could either put modulators next to each one of these, or if I feel that the cumulative sound effect is too high or too low in pitch, maybe I could put a modulator. Not a continuous modulator, but a regular modulator. How come I can't see it? Okay, because it's right here. In between. And now I can raise the pitch if I want to. If I feel it's too deep sounding, maybe I can go 1.5 and 1.5, make those the same. And leave these both set to 1 so that I don't have random volume fluctuations. That might be too much, so I'll go 1.125, 1.125, like so. Save. And then last but not least, I think this was too loud, so 1.5 on that. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. And going back to Aradel's blueprint, just before we spawn the projectile, and right after her hand is at full extension, you know what we're going to do? We're going to play sound at location. It's going to want to know what sound, so it's that sound cue that we just made, and I could find it in the browser, I suppose. Let me just kind of go back. It's not that far back. Content, and oh, I've got a search, that's why, and it's, where did I put that? SFX, there. I can just simply select that, go into this blueprint and pop it in there. And the location, of course, is going to just be get actor location. Oops, that's the wrong node. So sometimes if you type too fast, even if you type it correctly, you get a node that you don't want. So get actor location, and it's not typing. There it goes. That was very strange. Yeah, that's glitched out for some reason. Let me try that one more time. Location. Get actor location. And you see what happened is that it had this highlighted when in fact this is the node that I wanted. So I pressed enter just because of being impatient. I pressed it too quickly, and I failed to notice that. So get actor location does not require an execution pin, and the target doesn't need anything because it already knows that it's itself. Okay, so compile and save, and now we've got the big moment, the moment of truth. Okay, so timing seems a little late to me, so I'm going to back off on the delay time here. Our spawn duration variable, let's clear our search, had a default value of 0.832. Let's just try 0.79 and see if that feels better. To my ear, it sounded late. We'll play that again. Okay, so that's progress, but I think I want to show you one more thing. I want her to have to make effort sounds when she winds up and then casts the spell. That's why I have this human vocalizations pack. Now, we could have made these ourselves by recording with a microphone, but I doubt that I would be getting very many volunteers to record stuff like this into the microphone. So this was a convenient way for me to pick up a few of these things. So for the time being, let's go and make, we're going to go back into Magic Spell sound effects, and I'll make another sound cue in here. Actually, we're probably going to need 2 of them. Sound cue, and we're going to call this SC underscore spell underscore 01 underscore wind up, and make another sound cue. Audio sound cue, and we will rename this SC underscore spell 01 launch, or something like that. I should probably have specified that they were vocalizations somehow. So let's do the wind up first. And hey, I can get another content browser right here if I want to. So let's use Content Browser 3. I'll dock it down there. And I'm going to go back into human vocalizations. This is the wind up. So I'm going to listen to some of these wave files. Nope. I think I'm going to use some of the ones where she's jumping. I think that would probably work best. Let's see if I can find anything that are jumps. These are breaths. And more breaths. I know that there are some jumps in here. Coughing. Death. No. Later. That comes later. Jump. Yeah, sounds like she's about to expend effort. So that's going to go in the graph. Nope. Nope. Yes. Was this a jump up here? Yep. So you see, to me, these sound like she's about to exert effort. Not all of them. Yeah, that one's not bad. Oops. Keep it visible. Now that sounded fatigued. That one's pretty good. We'll organize them later. Okay, so let's just take these 4. And we will randomize them. So I'll marquee select, pull in a random node. We'll follow that with a modulator, or excuse me, a continuous modulator. And actually, no, not a continuous modulator. I beg your pardon. It's getting late and it's been a long day. A regular modulator, because these are one-shots. And we will, I think I'll just even leave these at their defaults. That should be good enough so that with a combination of 5 different sounds being modulated a little each time, this one sounded a little bit loud to me. Okay, so I think what I might do with that one is put a modulator here just for it, because we're not using a mixer. And I'll go point, oh wait, that's pitch. I'm going to go 0.9 and 0.9. The pitch can still do its thing. That's fine with me. Okay, so let's save that. I'm going to close this content browser so I can use it again for the other sound cue. So let's go back here, and we're going to do the launch. And for this one, we want not the wind-up, but the expenditure of that energy. Something like that. You can search through these more carefully than I am because there's more than one folder full of them. Debating that one. Okay, maybe. That might be funny. No. No. All right, let's find. If there's nothing left in this folder, then we can check the other folder. Death. Yeah, I think a lot of these are too long. Or just tonally wrong. That one's not bad. Let's put that one in there just for fun. Okay. So let's randomize these. And every once in a while she'll laugh when she casts that spell. Random. Modulator. Which I'll leave at default for now. Okay, I think I'm going to use that. Okay, so let's go now back out into Aradel's blueprint. And we're going to do some other stuff here. So first of all, when she is about to play this montage, that would be a good place to play the wind-up sound. Oops, I'm encroaching into something else that's commented off. So let's go play sound at location. And by the way, I could have stored that as a variable, that get actor location. I could have promoted that to a variable. As a matter of fact, no, it'll involve execution pins. So I'll just do get actor location again. Nope, I did the same mistake. I typed too quickly. Get actor location, not the one that's highlighted by default, but this one, and it doesn't need anything. And the sound that I'm going to use is the wind up, okay? So I'll select that and I'll populate this play sound at location. And then when it launches, this is going to be more or less concurrent with the actual launching of the spell. So I'll do 2 play sound at locations here. And yeah, they can both play at the same time. There's a way to prevent that from happening if it's necessary, and I can double dip on the location. So let's make sure I've got launch highlighted. Go back to Aradel and pop that in there. Compile and save. And let's see how this is. Okay, I think it needs to be louder. So let's go back into her script, because play sound at location, interestingly, if I twirl down this little menu like that, I can do a volume multiplier or a pitch multiplier and still have access to changing some of this stuff. I want to hear her voice louder, so I'm going to set that to 2 for now and see if that helps. The spell sound effect is kind of taking over. Okay, and yeah, we have to make different Foley sounds for her now that she's walking outside. There's probably going to be foliage and other things all around her. And you're going to learn a system for how to change the sound of the footsteps depending on what is being walked upon. But for one last bit of fun before I leave you tonight, let's go into starter content. And we're going to find a sound cue, a couple of sound cues, I think. Starter content, audio. And we can go starter background just to give it some ambience. And I'm pretty sure that that's got looping waves in it. So let's just check the wave players, make sure that they're both looping, and they are. And I made this cue earlier, starter birds, so I know it's looping. I think it was a little loud though, so take the final output and reduce the volume to maybe 0.65. So I made that one earlier. And if I play, now we have a little bit more atmosphere. We could also take the starter music. Let's just make sure that the starter music, is that the sound cue or is that the sound wave? Starter music, sound cue. Check to see that that's looping, and it is. Put that in there, and these will just play. A beautiful sunset. Very, very magic. Okay. Well, I guess that'll do it for tonight's review. And if you have any questions, as always, hit me up and we can go over this stuff together here in my office hours on campus or via Zoom or whatever it is you might need. Okay, thanks for sticking with it so long, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.